Today on episode 5 of the Play Guitar Podcast, I'm talking about chords, baby. We can all play them, but do we really know what they are and how they're built? Also, guitar news and another installment of Creating the Band. So stay tuned. Welcome to episode 5 of the Play Guitar Podcast. I'm Lee, and this is the podcast that's determined to make you a better guitar player. No matter if you're just starting out or you've been playing for years, this is the show that will help you become the guitarist you always wanted to be. Thank you for joining me on this cold January morning. Where I am, it was 25 degrees Fahrenheit this morning, and that is not normal. For this area, I'm in the South United States in the state of Georgia, and they're talking about snow tonight. I hope you're all staying warm wherever you are. I know the show has listeners from all over, and if you have a bright, warm, sunny day today, just know how jealous I am. Even as close by as Florida here, they're having a 70-degree day today, which is very nice. I'm jealous. It is freezing. And boy, I'm glad I don't have to play out in this. Have you ever had to play a gig in the cold? Man, I've played some cold ones. The guitar, it's tough. The guitar doesn't play right. It doesn't want to stay in tune. Your fingers get stiff and icy, and they just won't do what you want them to do. You get the cold wind in your face. You're bundled up in your coat so you can't move. Everything about it just feels wrong. Even in fall weather temperature, it's tough on the fingers. But I'll tell you, I'd like to know your tips for playing in less than warm temperatures. This could be an idea for an episode on the podcast, cold weather horror stories and how to make it through the gig. Enough of my complaining, on to the show. So on today's episode, I'm talking about chords, not just about memorizing a bunch of shapes, which is most players do. The player is in the game. But what are chords? A lot of players never take time to discover the inner workings of chords themselves and the way chords relate to each other. This knowledge of the inner workings of chords is super valuable, and it very much could be the thing that's holding you back, the thing you need to work on to get you back on track on the guitar. I'll go over where chords come from, and I'll go over what the importance of different notes in chords are, how chords are constructed differently on the guitar than on, say, the piano. We'll also talk about different types of chords, and finally, I'll touch on one of the most asked questions I get: what are arpeggios? And that's usually a super simple thing. Also, we have some guitar news and another episode of Creating the Band. And here's what's great about this podcast, or having a podcast in general. I've been calling this section Making the Band. And one day this week, I just put that into Google for some reason. And I found out there actually was a TV show with this name. I didn't watch it. I didn't know about it. But supposedly it's about some pop boy band creating thing or something. Maybe I had heard about it and it was in the back of my mind somewhere, so that's where I got it from. But no more. I've changed it. On a dime, I've changed it. It's now Creating the Band. And that's what's great about a podcast. I'm going to change things and have the show evolve over time. So let's get on to the main topic, chords and arpeggios. I've been working my way through my 6-part guide on opening up the fretboard. The first 2 parts show how knowing the notes on the fretboard and practicing technique exercises can give you an awesome start with opening up the guitar fretboard. And I've done those in some previous episodes of the podcast. I've made it all the way to part 3, which is what I feel the most common roadblock to getting better at the guitar is. It's called How to Build Chords and Arpeggios. If you're able to, I highly recommend opening up my companion blog post of the same name. It's at playguitarpodcast.com/chords. It will give you some visual info that helps in the area of chords and arpeggios, and go ahead and open that up if you're able to. Understanding what chords and arpeggios are and how they work. The first big hurdle a new guitarist makes when learning the guitar is usually playing chords. Learning the basic shapes can be tough. Making those basic shapes sound good, that is a whole other problem. Once you work your way through that beginning stage and get them sounding good, chords get a lot more fun. They open the gateway to hundreds of your favorite songs and a whole world of new possibilities. So what's the problem with that? It's not a problem at all. It's awesome. The problem comes a little farther on down the road. Learning these chord shapes and associating the shapes with familiar sounds is one of the most important parts of learning the guitar, but it's not the whole picture. As you start to play songs more and more, you may realize that certain chords like each other. And on the other hand, some chords don't go well together at all. Understanding the reasons for this is extremely important if you want to move forward on the guitar. Also, when you start making your own melodies and lead guitar parts, you notice that scales are very particular as to what chords and chord progressions match the particular sound. There's a reason for this, but we need some more information. We need to know how these things work. The first step towards understanding why these songs sound the way they do is understanding how chords and arpeggios are constructed. Today's podcast is going to give you the basics on how chords and arpeggios are built. I didn't understand how music worked. I started playing guitar when I was 12, and my private guitar teachers, they taught me a lot of chords and a lot of songs. And after a few years of playing and memorizing all these chords, I started to see the common chord progressions that happened in a lot of songs. I could also see how these same chords worked in different styles of music. I knew that there had to be a reason these chords sounded good together. I was also playing my scale patterns that I'd memorized. It was a lot of fun to make melodies over these songs I knew. I was starting to realize that every once in a while, there'd be a chord that just didn't sound right with the scale that I was playing. All the other chords worked, but this one chord just sounded sour. I needed to know why some scales worked over some chords and not others. Right about the time these questions started coming to me, my high school offered a theory class, and I signed right up. Although the focus of the class was more for classical music, the basic ideas applied to the music I was wanting to play at the time. Within a few classes, I found out how these chords I've been playing were constructed and why different chords related to each other. And this is just what I was needing. It's just what I was looking for. The things I had learned were starting to make sense to me. Before, the songs I had learned just sounded cool, but now I knew the reason they sounded cool. I could take this really valuable information and apply it to my own solos and my own songs. I could feel myself becoming a better musician every class I went to. It was awesome. But flash forward to now, I've been a gigging guitar player and a teacher for over 30 years, and I'm still using and teaching this stuff on a daily basis. I find the majority of students who come to me now have memorized a lot of songs off of YouTube, but they're frustrated. They have no idea what chords and scales they're playing, and they don't feel like they're understanding the guitar the way that they should. Today, I'm going to show you the first step that I show all of them, and that's how chords and arpeggios are built. We're going to show the basics of chord and arpeggio construction. It's not by far all you need to know about chords and scales, but this first step will start you on the path to understanding the guitar music that you want to play. So let's start at the beginning. What came first, the chord or the scale? That's kind of like the chicken and egg. Which one came first? That one's pretty tough to answer, but luckily for chords and scales, it's not that complicated. The scale always comes first. Every chord you play is constructed with notes from a scale. If you're a beginner and you're not sure what scales and chords are, a scale is an ordered group of notes that are played one after another. And a chord is a group of notes that are all played at the same time and they sound good together. The first piece of information we need to know is our basic major scale. We will use the C major scale today because having no sharps or flats, it's the easiest to work with. So here are the notes of the C major scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. If you're familiar with the piano, you'll know that these are the notes on the white keys. These notes are also familiar to most everyone as the Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do song. So next, we're going to give each one of these notes, we're going to give them a number. And I'll talk about why that's important in a minute. So the first note was C. We're going to give that 1. The next was D. That's a 2. The next was E. That's 3. F is 4. G is 5. A is 6. B is 7. And then we get back to C, which is an 8. You could also call that 1. That's where we start over again. So we got from C all the way to C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's our next C right there. These numbers are very important. Each number of the scale gives its note a certain job. Which number do you think is the most important? Of course, the first one is the most important. Number 1 would be the most important. In a scale, the first note is called the tonic note. It's also frequently mislabeled the root note. Although similar, the root note is usually the strongest note in a chord, not a scale. So for these scales, our most important note is called the tonic. The first note gives us the strongest sound in that group of notes. The tonic note commonly ends a melody because it's the note that makes everything sound complete. I like to think of the tonic like the period or exclamation point at the end of a sentence. You know the melody's finished when you play it and you're ready to move on to another idea. Each of the other notes of the scale have different jobs as well, and as we learn to build chords, you'll see. So which notes do we use in the chords? Like I said before, to build a chord, we have to have a few notes that sound good together. If you wanted, you could build a chord off of every note of the C major scale. So let's try to build a chord off the first note, the tonic note in our scale. The first note is a C. That's going to be our starting note, and we're going to call that the root note since now we're building chords. So we have our starting note, the C. To make a chord, we need several other notes that sound good together, that match each other. So how do we find some more notes that sound good with the C? So when building chords, we're going to use every other note from the scale. So we had our scale before, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're going to use the first, the third, and the fifth of that scale, and that will give us our 3 notes to make our major chord, our basic C major chord. So the first note is a C. Second is D. We don't need that. Third is E. We need that one. Fourth is F. We don't need that. And the fifth one was G. We need that one. So our 3 notes are going to be C, E, and G. If you play all 3 of those together, you've got a C major chord. If you take a look at the C major chord that we've all learned and go through all of those notes, you'll find we only have C's, E's, and G's. Here it is. So what we're going to have, the first note is a C, second is E, the third is G, that's the open G string. The fourth note on the B string of the first fret, that's another C, and then on the high E string that's open, we have another E. So we have some doubled notes. So even though we have 5 notes in the regular old C chord that we've always played, we only really have 3 different ones and 2 doubles. C, E, G, and then a higher C and E. C and E. So there are just 3 notes in that, and we call that a triad. In a second, we're going to talk about triads. But before we do that, let's make another chord starting with the second note from the C major scale. The second note of the scale is a D. So if C is 1, D is 2. Let's try to make a chord off of this D note here. And let's follow the same idea, the same formula as above. We'll get 3 notes using the every other note process. So if D is the second note, we would skip the third note and go to the fourth, which is an F, and skip the fifth note and go to the sixth, which is an A. So we would get 3 notes, the D, the F, and the A. Let's play that right here. That's a basic minor chord. Minor chords have a sad sound. I'm going to play the D minor chord that we all learned in the beginning, the one that looks like a D chord, but the one on the high E string is 1 fret lower. Here's what it sounds like. Okay, let's see if that works out with what we found. We found that in the D minor chord, it has a D, an F, and an A. So let's check all of these notes from our standard D minor chord. The first note is an open D. That's easy. The next note is the second fret of the G string. That's an A. Well, that's one of our 3 notes. On On the next note, it's on the B string on the 3rd fret. That's another D. That's a double. And then on the high string, we have the 1st fret. The 1st fret on the high E string is an F. There's our 3rd note. So we have a D, a D, and an F. We've got all 3 notes, the D, F, and the A. Now they're in different orders, but that doesn't really matter. We just need to have all 3 of them there. And we have a double of a D. So what we've just been talking about are called triads. What are triads? Triads are 3-note chords. They're our most basic chords, and there are 4 types of them. We have major, which is happy, minor, which is sad. We have augmented, which is like a dreamy sound. And then we have diminished, which is a tense sound. Each of these types of chords are constructed with only 3 notes each. They all have a different sound, though. The reason they sound different is because the distances between the 3 notes are different. These distances between the notes have a name. It's called intervals. If you're interested in going deeper into chords and scales, and want to learn more about intervals, there's one coming up pretty soon. There's a podcast coming up on that. So it's going to make understanding intervals and scales really easy. So stay tuned for that. The next type of chord we have are called 7th chords. It's a very common type of chord, and you've all played some 7th chords, probably the G7 and D7. And if you play blues, you play 9th chords, which is just a fancier version of a 7th chord. So today we're going to construct a 7th chord from our scale that we've been using. So let's take a look at the C major scale again. We had C1, D2, E3, F4, G5, A6, B7, and C8, or 1. To make the 7th chord, we follow the same formula that we did with the triads. We just add another note. So with a triad, we use every other notes for 3 notes. So we had, for the C, we had C, E, and G. 1, 3, 5. But now for 7th chords, we're going to add another skipped note. So for 7th chords, we'll use every other note for 4 notes. So let's try that. C is 1. We're going to skip 2. E is 3. We're going to skip 4. G is 5. We're going to skip 6. And then we're going to go to 7, which is a B. So those notes that we have now is 1 C, 3 E, 5 G, and 7, which is a B. This chord is called a major 7th chord. It has a happy sound like the C major that we did before, but when we add this B note, it gives it kind of a fancier, prettier sound that the triad C, the regular C major chord, didn't have. And this is a common chord you hear in jazz, you hear it in a lot of wedding songs, and you hear it in rock songs occasionally too, but it's not one of the main songs. So let's look at this chord a little bit closer. Here's a common C major 7th chord. Now this chord looks almost exactly like the regular old C that we play. The only difference is on the B string, where we would play the 1st fret for a regular C chord, we lift that off. That gives the open string, and it gives us that B. So we have the C note, E note, G note, B, the open B string, and then the E, open E string. In this chord, we got the same 4 notes from the scale that we played earlier. The E is repeated. But other than that, it's C, E, G, C, and then the repeated E. But not all 7th chords are called major 7th chords. There's lots of different types of 7th chords, of 4-note chords. And check out my upcoming article and my upcoming podcast for info on intervals and the different types of 7th chords. So the last thing I want to touch on today is arpeggios. I've sure you heard the word arpeggio before. It may sound fancy, but arpeggios are really, really, really simple. An arpeggio is a group of chord notes that are played one after another. Not like you would just strum a chord. Those are all played at the same time. But an arpeggio, you would play one note, then the next note, then the next note. They can be played in any order you want, as long as they are the chord notes. So let's take a look here at the C major chord that we played earlier, the easy one. So here it is strummed, and all the notes are ringing. But this time I'm going to play it different. I'm going to play each note one at a time. Did you hear that? C, E, G, C, E. When playing one note at a time across the guitar, you turn this chord into an arpeggio. This is the simplest way for guitar players to play arpeggios. Just take the chord that you already know and pick the notes separately. You can let them ring, kind of like a harp player would, or you could just play them one after another. It doesn't matter. Either way, it's an arpeggio. And this is the easiest way to play it, but it's not the only way. You can play arpeggios off of your scale patterns as well. So here's a C major scale. I'm going to play the first, the third, and the fifth notes in order. So I want 1, 3, 5, and then the high 1, and then back 5, 3, 1. You don't always have to play arpeggios in order like we just did. Here's a different way of playing it. You can jumble them up a little bit. I'm just playing them in different orders. So that's it. That's arpeggios on the guitar. Super simple stuff. It's not tough. They do get harder, though, when you use more difficult chords and you play it in different places on the neck. But the idea is the same. It's a very simple idea. I hope you got a lot out of today's topic. What I talked about today is really just the basics of chord theory. If you want to know more about how chords and arpeggios and chord progressions work, you can sign up for my early adopter list at playguitaracademy.com. I'll let you know, if you do that, I'll let you know when my online license site goes live. It's called Play Guitar Academy. It's based on all the knowledge I've gained through the years teaching my group classes, and I do daily super focused practice along with you. And I've taken the ideas from my classes, my podcasts, my videos, and I've created what I feel is the easiest method for moving from beginner all the way through to advanced guitar. So thanks for listening, and stay tuned for guitar news and creating the band. This is Guitar News. This is my weekly time to report on the wonderful and wacky, hysterically dysfunctional world of guitar players. I click my fingers to the bone scouring the internet to bring you the best and interesting and insightful guitar drama from my browser straight to your ears. The first article is from USA Today, and it's all about how Joe Satriani takes a new approach with what happens next. It's a pretty good article. I think it would sum it up for you. He's got a new album coming up and a new tour. And there was a documentary that his son ZZ filmed for him. It was called Beyond the Supernova, and I guess it inspired him to make a change. And the article talks about all the different things and gives some history about him. But the big thing, he's got Chad Smith from the Chili Peppers playing drums. And then he's got Glenn Hughes, who was a singer for Black Sabbath and played bass for Deep Purple, playing on it. So it sounds like it's going to be a more bluesy, rockier type album. He's also got G3. It started on January 11th, and it's going through next month. So he's out there this time with Phil Collen from Def Leppard and John Petrucci. Easy for you to say, John Petrucci of Dream Theater. So that should be a good one. So check that out. I'm going to check these out myself. I'll check the album out and report back to you. Next is from Guitar World, and this says that Motorhead guitarist Fast Eddie Clarke is dead at 67, and he was the last surviving member of the best known lineup of Motorhead. He was, let's see here, he was with them from 77 to 82, and he was, he was on the band's first 5 studio albums, including Ace of Spades and their live album that was No Sleep Till Hammersmith. He died peacefully in the hospital after being treated for pneumonia. So that's terrible. I love listening to Motorhead. That's some of my early memories from high school listening to them. So this one's for Fast Eddie. With the NAMM show coming up, we're getting a lot of info about new music products. It should be fun to see. It's coming up later on this month, and here's one I just kind of was browsing through them. Here's one I thought I'd pass along to you. This is from Music Radar, and it says, in NAMM 2018, the Rat Tail gives you vintage rat distortion tones in a guitar cable. Guitarists the world over love the sound of the Proco Rat distortion pedal, and now they can get it without a stomp box, courtesy of the Rat Effects Rat Tail distortion cable. This is built using the same clipping diodes that feature in vintage Rat pedals. The Rat Tail boasts 2 range of distortion access via an easily accessible dial. 3 settings are on board. It's got true bypass. It's got distortion overdrive with unity gain, and then a distortion overdrive with 3 dB of gain. There's no price yet, but man, a Rat pedal with no pedal, straight out of your cord. Pretty cool. So I'm interested in that, and I thought I'd pass that along, and we'll keep our eyes on that one. The next article is from www.straitstimes.com, and it says Mexico guitar makers are in demand after the success of Coco, the movie. Let's see. They talk about this luthier Salvador Meza's been making guitars since he was a boy, and now thanks to this new movie Coco, he's one of the many renowned guitar makers in the town of Paracho, Mexico, which has been producing artfully crafted guitars since the 18th century. So looks like the Disney movie is helping with the guitar. The animators at Pixar, the studio behind the film, based Miguel's guitar on a real-life version made by an artisan from Paracho, and demand for the replicas of this has got them working in overdrive. So everyone's making the Coco guitars down in Mexico. Wonderful. That's great news. Anything can help keep the guitar in the public eye. And the last article, this is from Ultimate Guitar. It's not really a news article. I typed in guitar news, and this came up. It says, Steve Morse, how too much practice can be bad for your guitar playing. And I thought, well, I don't know if that's news or not, but I really agree with this. I'm going to read a little bit about that, and I wanted to bring it to you. It says, it can work the other way around, where what you play resembles very closely what you practice. It's easy for the practice to become very repetitive, says Steve Morse. So I do encourage people to practice, but I encourage them to play differently than they practice. Like practice this to fix this particular problem and make yourself a better player in that way. And then forget it, and when you play, just open up your heart and soul. The idea is not to think about your finger very much. So anyway, I agree with him in a slightly different way. I've been telling my students a lot. I've noticed I've got 2 types. I've got the people who say, oh yeah, I practice. I sat down with a guitar, and they just kind of noodle around a whole lot. And that's all they do, kind of play songs they already know, and they're not getting any better. They're just getting more of the same. And I have other types of students who they just practice everything over and over and over again from the lesson sheet. And that's not a lot of fun either. So I'm trying to get everybody to change their practice habits into 2 short sections. The first section is work on the stuff that you have in your lesson, and do that for a short amount of time, 10, 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And then take a break, and then come back later and spend 10, 15, 20 minutes playing fun stuff. The songs that you know, songs that you want to know, those kind of things. And so having these 2 sections of you practicing daily, a short section with stuff from your lesson, and then a short section with some stuff that's fun, you're going to go forward wonderfully. That repetition going from day to day, it helps. I've noticed over the years, you can tell when someone's not practicing, and then the night before their class or their lesson, they stayed up a couple hours and worked on it. So they haven't touched the guitar all week, and then right at the last minute, they try to learn everything before they have to come in. And then you can tell from the players who practice a little bit every day, they seem to go forward faster. And the people who spend the time the night before trying to cram everything, they usually forget stuff, and I'm having to go over and over topics again. So I agree with you, Steve Morse. Good article. Thank you. So that's guitar news. Hold on for creating the band. Let's get into creating the band. This is where I share with you each week every step it takes to start from scratch, from just an idea in my head all the way through the process to end up with a working band, with an album, videos, website, promotional materials, all that stuff. So I'm going to chronicle the whole step it takes to where I am now to with a brand new band. Right now, I'm collecting ideas for songs. I'm going to have 10 songs, and I just want little snippets of ideas to kind of point me in the right direction. So far, I've shown you 6. Some of these are new ideas, and some of these are ideas I've had for a while that I think would fit well for this project I'm putting together. Today, I have my idea for song 7. I found it while I was going through some old project files, and there's not a whole lot to it. It's just a riff and a drum beat, but there's something about this riff I really like. So I looped the part I like about 4 times in this clip, and the rest of it it's kind of loose, and I might have to tighten it up if I keep it in the song. But I'm excited to see how this song develops over time. So here's idea number 7. With 7 ideas now, I'm getting a better idea of the tone of this project. I like it. It sounds to me, of all the songs, not just this clip, like a mix of John Scofield, Joe Bonamassa, and Robin Trower with some funkier beats, and I'm excited about the beginning ideas. I only have 3 more ideas left before I start shifting the focus of this and then starting to flesh out each song, working on each clip and turning them into a full song. So there it is. That's making the band. And that's a wrap for the show today. Thanks for joining me today for the Play Guitar Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show on iTunes or your podcast player. Also, I'd really appreciate if you could leave me an iTunes review for the show. If you're interested in online lessons, go on over to playguitaracademy.com and join my early adopter list to get news on the opening of the site and an early adopter discount. Just sign up right there. Also, follow me on all of my different social media pages, and links to them are all at playguitarpodcast.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.